Attorney Robert Barnes is representing Ethan Wentworth of Airville and Rusty Herr of Christiana.
I've seen crazy cases. This is the craziest thing I've ever seen.
They're former dairy farmers who now operate Noble Solutions, a breeding company which helps dairy farms with reproductive management of cattle. For 2 weeks, the men have sat in prison, denied bail.
They are still as baffled today as they were the day they were suddenly jailed as to why they're there, what happened, did they do something wrong? They're still trying to figure that out. Is there some way they can fix it?
According to prison officials, Wentworth was booked into the York County Prison on April 10th for a 30-day sentence on a civil charge. Herr was arrested 1 day later on a contempt of court charge and sent to Lancaster County Prison for a 30-day sentence as well. Barnes says neither were given due process.
Hey there, friends. Welcome back to As a Man Thinketh on Yanasa TV. So somebody brought this up to my attention, and this is one of the scariest stories that I have ever heard. And any of you who are into animal husbandry, who take care of animals, who occasionally have people come out to help you with your animals, this case should deeply concern you. First of all, let's get to the facts here. 2 Pennsylvania men operating a dairy reproduction service are imprisoned following a complaint of practicing veterinary medicine without a license. I think it's important to emphasize the word veterinary medicine. Specifically, from what we know, Noble Solutions was performing reproductive ultrasound pregnancy checks. According to their Facebook page, Noble Solutions, Noble, but it's kind of like one word, noble. I like it, guys. Noble Solutions is an encompassing reproductive management business dedicated to dairy farmers to help them meet and exceed the reproduction goals within their herd. Ranchers use ultrasound for many reasons. Sometimes ranchers use ultrasound to actually check the fat content of their beef, to know how their feeding program is going, to know whether or not they're going to be able to create that prime cut that sells for the most amount of money. Ultrasound could be used to diagnose medical conditions, but in this particular case, what they're doing is they're using it to observe the physical condition of the cow. And I think there's a distinction between those two. According to the Journal of Medical Ethics, pregnancy in and of itself is not regarded as dysfunctional. So if it's not regarded as dysfunctional, it's not a medical condition, it's not a negative diagnosis. Pregnancy is not usually considered a disease. So these men were sentenced and jailed on a 30-day civil sentence by the Commonwealth Court without a hearing or trial. And this is, I think, one of the bigger factors that I'll get into a little bit here is what is the Commonwealth Court and how exactly did these guys end up in jail for 30 days without even a trial?
The state of Pennsylvania had a judge sign an order of imprisonment for 2 people without ever naming them as parties to a case, without them ever being charged with any crime, without any hearing before an order of imprisonment was issued, all of which is completely illegal under Pennsylvania law and the United States Constitution.
Okay, so what we know is that back in 2010, a complaint was filed against Herr, one of the defendants, by the Department of State, accusing him of unlicensed practice of veterinary medicine for basically performing these ultrasounds on cows. The State Board of Veterinary Medicine, which heard the complaint, ruled that he was in fact practicing without a license and was ordered to pay a $3,500 fine and stop what he was doing. In 2018, they filed a similar complaint against the other defendant, Wentworth, and he was given a $3,000 fine and also a similar cease and desist. Don't do it anymore. In 2020, another complaint was filed. Both Rusty Herr and Ethan Wentworth were named in that complaint. The big issue is that because these guys were picked up from their homes, taken away from their wives and their children with these warrants, and thrown into jail for 30 days without bail, this was a sentence, so there wouldn't be bail. They were serving out a 30-day sentence without a sentencing hearing, no mitigating factors, none of that was involved. That somebody just signed this order and said, throw them in jail for 30 days. No due process, okay? Because of that, we don't even know if the reason why they're in jail has anything to do with the previous complaints that were filed against them, because they never went through the due process of having any type of sentencing hearing, of them saying, well, they're continuing to do this. They'd still have to prove in court, right, that they're continuing to violate the law. They never had a follow-up hearing. They never had any of that. They just were picked up in front of their kids, in front of their family, thrown in jail for 30 days, and their family has to do without them just abruptly like that. In a statement to Fox News, the Pennsylvania Department of State says, while the Department of State can neither confirm nor deny the existence of an investigation or matter, speaking generally, the department reviews every potential license violation of which it becomes aware. So a couple things pointers that I think about this case. And again, this is an opinion vlog. I've given you some facts. It's up to you to determine what you think. There is no record of them going to court for a sentencing hearing or of the court proving that they continued to violate those earlier filings from several years ago. I mean, it's 2024, right? And so the last complaint filed was 4 years ago. So number one, to me, I feel like you would have to have some sort of due process there. They should have the right to defend themselves and make a case before they're just thrown into a jail. Whoever signed those and the sheriffs who implemented them, in my opinion, who are elected officials, should have challenged those warrants, asked for what the justification was, because there is no justification for just jailing people. You can't just do that. The big issue that I have is that, and I think that this is an issue that should hit home for every rancher, every farmer, anybody who practices animal husbandry, is that what these guys were doing was nothing outside of the normal practices of good animal husbandry, right? Every rancher, everybody out there should have the right to pregnancy check, to do all these things. And these guys didn't advertise themselves as being licensed veterinarians. What they advertised themselves as being dairy experts, people who could come in and assist, not determine, not treat, not diagnose, not medicate, but assist with the pregnancy process of the cows to help increase to help make it a better process for the farmer. And there are lots of farm services across this country. A lot of farmers today, they don't have tons of employees on hand. They hire people to come in to help out with things. And I have been to a lot of pregnancy checks over the years, and most of the time there is a veterinarian there performing the checks. But I've also been to ranches where the ranchers themselves are knowledgeable enough that they can carry out those pregnancy checks without having the veterinarian come out, and there's nothing wrong with it. Like I said, pregnancy is a physical condition. It is not a condition that is considered to be dysfunctional, and therefore it is not a disease. There's no medication that has to be applied. And they weren't applying medication. They were using ultrasound technology to check on the status of the baby, to check on the physical condition. Folks, that's normal husbandry practices. It's perfectly normal. And whether or not you have all of the equipment yourself or you hire a farm service to come out and help you with it. I mean, here in North Carolina, we actually have artificial insemination services that aren't vets. In fact, the state extension service has clinics to teach you how to artificially inseminate. And this isn't even artificial insemination. What this is checking the pregnancy with an ultrasound. Just simply checking the presence of a calf. The other thing I have an issue with here is that the State Department said that they research licensing violations. Now, I know in the state of North Carolina, real estate board, for example, because I still have a real estate license, I keep it inactive, but the Real Estate Commission has the right to discipline those that have a license, that fall under their jurisdiction. If somebody violates a law that is not a licensed real estate agent, and you'll hear this a lot, but licensed real estate agents will often forfeit their license back to the commission if they have done something wrong. And that is to keep the commission itself from being able to take civil action against them. It doesn't stop them from taking criminal action, but it takes them outside of their jurisdiction. I have forfeited my license. Your regulatory body no longer has a right over me. And I think that that is kind of a rule of thumb that may even apply to Pennsylvania. I don't know, I'm not an attorney in Pennsylvania, but I think, you know, based on the fact that the licensing board has the authority to oversee its licensees, I don't think that the licensing board has the authority to take action against a non-licensee. Therefore, the board itself making this determination and putting fines against these guys may have not been legal in the first place. What they should have done is taken it to a court system and actually had a trial within the courts. It shouldn't have been something that was overheard by the board in the first place. And in both, all of these complaints that were filed in 2010, 2018, and 2020, those complaints came from the veterinary board that doesn't have jurisdiction over them. The only thing that they should be able to do is file a complaint in the court system and let the court system decide their fate, whether or not they even fall under the jurisdiction of the licensing board. All of that is a question. And that's why I think a lot of this is going to end up going to the Supreme Court. The other issue that I have here is it's the Commonwealth Court that signed the warrant and put these guys in jail on a civil penalty of up to 30 days without even having a trial, okay? The Commonwealth Court does not typically oversee criminal cases, and criminal conduct is generally what you see people end up behind bars for, not doing something that wasn't considered criminal. This is actually considered a civil case, and it can't be considered criminal unless they go through a criminal trial. So none of this makes any sense to me. None of this is legal. What this is a board. These are people who have overstepped the law so far that the people themselves involved in incarcerating these people should be investigated and thrown into prison. I mean, this is such a far overreach. It's not even funny. They didn't even go through the right court processes in order to make sure that these people belonged behind bars. And I don't think that they did. Like I said, what they were doing is nothing outside the normal practices of good animal husbandry, accepted good animal husbandry practices. They weren't performing a diagnosis, and even according to the Journal of Medical Ethics, pregnancy is not dysfunctional. There is no reason to have a veterinarian there unless you discover something and you need a veterinarian to come out and diagnose it. I've heard that some of these practices in Pennsylvania particularly could be a little Godfather-like. I think that somebody's mad because the Amish decided that they're gonna call in, you know, these guys running this farm service to help them with their overall pregnancy, and that they're not getting called in every time they need an ultrasound where they can charge the big bucks. That's what happened here. And they've got friends on the board. Of course, the board, the board denies having any knowledge of these guys even going into jail or that there being anything going beyond the 2020 complaint.
The Pennsylvania Veterinary Medical Association filed the 2018 and 2020 complaints. An association board member says he's unaware of the circumstances surrounding the men's arrests.
It took us by surprise, just like everybody else. According to the Practice Act, what they were doing is illegal. They were diagnosing a physical condition by a method or mode. Whether or not they should be in prison, I am not a judge. That is not for me to decide.
Barnes argues that claim.
These are just ordinary, everyday people. Neither one of them do anything that needs to be licensed by any agency in the state. I've talked to multiple farmers and professionals here that say this is not veterinary care.
A statement given to Fox 43 by the men's families say in part, quote, "Our families are struggling to cope without our husbands and fathers, Ethan and Rusty, who have been unlawfully imprisoned for more than 2 weeks now. We miss them terribly, and our children are traumatized by what happened."
Something's gone completely off the rails here.
So this entire process is missing something called due process, the legal courses of action that somebody needs to take to incarcerate somebody. And like I said, there was not even a sentencing hearing. They just went straight to jail. Guys, this should have you scared. If I lived in the state of Pennsylvania, I would be selling my farm and getting the heck out of there, which is probably what they want you to do. The reality is these people think that they are so far above the law, so far above governance, that they no longer feel that you as a citizen deserve proper due process. They think, you know what? You know, they're still practicing. Well, are they? Did they change their methods? What exactly was found before that said that they were doing medical practice? Because just simply using an ultrasound, you don't have to have a veterinarian license to go via an ultrasound machine. You know, if you wanted to check your ribeyes while they're still alive on the cattle, there's nothing that says you couldn't use an ultrasound machine for that. What says you can't use an ultrasound machine just to check the physical condition of a calf in the cow? You're not diagnosing anything. They didn't even take these guys back to court to say if the criteria was met, that was met when they first got fined, that said, hey, they're continuing to do this practice, right? So they could have changed things. They could have adapted things according to what their attorney said that they had to do. We don't know any of that. There's very little, this is a case where there is very little information out there publicly, even to the guys sitting in jail, as to why specifically they were arrested and incarcerated for 30 days, other than the fact that they're dairy farmers themselves and that they run a practice of assisting other dairy farmers, particularly the Amish community, and it's Pennsylvania. Think about it, folks. These situations are getting way too blatant, way too out of hand. Anyway, guys, stay tuned until next time. Be safe out there and be responsible. You know, I'm not saying that we need to go pick up pitchforks and do whatever, but I'm just saying there are people with power out there right now who are abusing it. They're abusing it because our federal government is a mess. They can get away with it. There is no protection for the people, and everybody needs to wake up so that when they go and fill out that ballot, it's pretty clear what's not acceptable.